Ciao a tutti e benvenuti e bentornati alle nostre trasmissioni. Oggi siamo in compagnia di Eve Lorgen. Hello Eve, nice to have you here again.
Oh, good to meet you. Yeah.
Eve la conoscete già, abbiamo già fatto un'intervista con lei, è autrice dell'Autoscuro di Cupido, libro che ha scritto prima in inglese e che ha avuto un grandissimo risalto internazionale. È stato il modo con cui io ho potuto avere accesso a lei e alle sue informazioni e finalmente mettere chiarezza a una serie di eventi che mi sono capitati. Ho conosciuto Eve, ho potuto finalmente fare Eve il suo lavoro, ho potuto finalmente fare chiarezza su tante cose. Sono entrato in contatto con lei, l'ho intervistata. Ho scritto un libro anch'io sul Dark Cupido, mettendo in mezzo le mie esperienze e il lavoro di moltissimi ricercatori italiani che avevano qualche cosa da dire a riguardo. Eve ha segnato una informazione epocale nell'ambito dell'ufologia e dell'esoterismo con le sue scoperte rispetto al Dark Cupido, segnando veramente un'informazione epocale che io ho cercato di portare in Italia nella maniera più appassionata e realistica possibile. Oggi Eva ha tradotto il suo vecchio libro in italiano, aggiungendo 30.000 parole nuove, non so quanti altri casi nuovi. Parleremo di tutto questo con lei. L'intervista è in inglese, per cui mettetevi i sottotitoli o imparate l'inglese, sarebbe l'ora. Quindi partiamo. Let's start. Dear Eve, it's really a pleasure to have you here again. I just said to my community and to Italian speakers that with your work about the Dark Cupid, you make a epochal sign in the history of ufology,
Mhm.
alien stuff, and esoteric because this point of view, this research is giving so many answers to so many people about what is happening in their relationships, in their lives, and gave finally the answers really a lot of weird relationships that people lived. I lived a few of them. So now you wrote this book in Italian, you translated this book in Italian, you want to arrive to the Italian public. I am giving you all my attention, all my audience, because I believe that what you are doing is simply incredible and amazing. So you can say whatever you want to start.
There's so much to this phenomena, but I will have to say that it began many years ago, probably 30 years ago now, almost, where I was working with people who had UFO and alien abduction histories. And then they started observing that they were having love obsessions and anomalous relationship orchestration and interference by the alien beings that would visit them or take them on a regular basis. And so those kind of relationships, I did one book on many years ago in English called The Love Bite. And so that was more focused on the extraterrestrial aspect of knowing that these were the beings responsible for manipulating and orchestrating and setting things up and breaking people up, and how there was a lot of drama and chaos and emotional energy involved in these relationships that was more than, quote, normal. So as we move forward, 12 plus years, I wrote a second book called The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs, the Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism. And so that book I did a second edition to, just released, last December, last few months ago, in English and Italian now, which includes, 30,000 more words from the original Dark Cupid book, with many more case histories and deeper insight articles that explains much more nuanced experiences that relate to what we're calling other dimensional entity or parasite interference that may take many forms. And the people may not necessarily have alien abductions or UFO sightings in their life. Many of them have.
Mhm.
but it can take the appearance of that, but not necessarily be aliens. But the dynamic of the relationship is being supernaturally influenced and interfered or orchestrated beyond the norm with many different strange experiences, and a lot of paranormal and supernatural overtones. So that became, some people will call this, they would think, oh, I met my soulmate or my twin flame, except they're visiting me in these dreams. And then it only happened after I started maybe going to a particular guru or a meditation teacher or had a short relationship or date with a particular person. And then it escalated into these unusual astral visitations and strong unions or connections in another dimension with a being that might take the image of the person that they met in life. Sometimes it's someone they know, like a doctor or a chiropractor or a meditation teacher or a channeler or a superstar, a musician or an actress or actor, and then a an interdimensional being that is I call false light will masquerade in the image of the person of that they knew and then start manipulating them in these other dimensional realities, or they will pretend that this other person has a relationship with them through social media manipulation and all kinds of uh, it's almost like a targeting scenario. It's very unusual. So I got a lot of those kinds of reports, but they tended to be connected with people who had some kind of uh, family influence with paranormal Illuminati connections or UFO uh, whistleblowing or people who were connected in the military industrial complex. So it covers a lot of material, but the aspect of channeling was very dangerous for many people, where let's say a person was a channeler. And there's a case in The Dark Side of Cupid where let's say the man he had a love obsession with this woman who was a channeler, but she was also very psychic and would do a lot of psychic readings, and she had this magnetic ability to just attract men, like they would follow her like, puppies in love. And then she would just kind of like lead them around and then never really have a relationship with them, but lead them on in these unusual psychic connections and dreams and influences and tell them about past lives. And they had past lives together. And then they build up this idea that they've had this special past together and they were soulmates together. And then they don't even like have a relationship with them and they just like switch them off like they mean nothing. And then the person is like pining away in unrequited love from this person who has all these entities working behind them, making all these energetic connections and then feeding on all that energy of the unrequited love and the longing and the emotional chaos. So that was a primary type of love bite, Dark Cupid, that's in the book. So some of the cases I actually got from the late Barbara Bartholic, who was my mentor in, gosh, from the mid 1990s until she died in 2011. But she did alien abduction research for 30 years, actually did early work with Jacques Vallée and like quality hypnotherapy with alien abduction people. And so she discovered a lot underneath that were like screen memories. And she did long case studies of people who had love obsessions that were engineered by these beings that were interacting with them or taking them, and then just setting them up in these high drama scenarios and supernatural things. So I have three cases in the Dark Cupid that were from Barbara Bartholic that were very significant because they put together connections between the alien abductions, the extraterrestrials, false spirit guides, reptilian entities, and demonic witchcraft kinds of connections and other unusual things that might not be reported together with people who do classic alien abduction research because in general, they want it to be scientific and credible and keep it within a limited definition of what this quote experience or who these beings are. But in reality, they have a many, many more behaviors, parameters, and connections to their identity, their camouflage, and their behaviors that once we know how to read this and perceive it in relationships and the paranormal kinds of things, then we can see the root energy behind what's orchestrating this. And so this is what the dark side of Cupid really shows in many case histories and a lot of discussion that brings things together from not just the alien abduction. Aliens are manipulating and putting people together so they have children or they have love obsessions for emotional loosh harvesting, emotional energy, but also the twin flame experience with some kind of false light interdimensional being that may work on many people simultaneously, like an octopus feeder. So there could be one large being that works through a particular, it could be a sorcerer or a black magician. And then maybe that person places themselves as a new age guru or healer, for example, or a channeler or a sorcerer or whatever, a gatekeeper. And then many people will be drawn to them because of the information, like they're speaking the truth, and people are awakening to these experiences and they want to talk to an expert. And then the expert is like hosted by one of these like large octopus feeder entities. So they're like egregores that I've heard clairvoyant people describe it when they could perceive this in their clairvoyant vision that a particular human being may be partially possessed by a very high level being that presents itself sometimes as false light, or they may be like a dark shadow being, or a reptilian, or a Draco, or it may have different forms, like the Horus Ra figure, for example. And they may show themselves as these winged angels, but they're not, you know? And then they will feed on like this one host will be connected to this being, but they're connected to maybe hundreds or thousands of people. Like this big octopus, like an
Wow.
egregore that's feeding on all these people, and then interdimensional connections between all these beings. So they're like playing on puppets on a string.
Now, many people which are in the twin flame scenario, they start to believe they are in the dark Cupid scenario. There are true twin flame connections, or is always and just a dark Cupid?
Oh, I wouldn't say always or never. But the ones that have reported it to me, they were in distress and could not let go of the obsession and the connection that they felt because there was still an energetic cord connecting them to the former partner that they were in love with, who had these qualities that might have another interdimensional parasite being or an alien or a demon or something else. And so they come and they're losing energy. They can't stop being obsessed. They never want to be with anybody again. And so they're in distress. That would be a dark type because it's run by a vampiric entity.
Yeah.
In genuine connections that are good, I would say both people are willing to do what I call their shadow work, their trauma recovery. So they have authentic connections of healing their wounds that might cause bad behaviors or addictions or weird stuff in relationships. And when they're willing to do that work, then they can come together and have a powerful, good relationship. But if there's still entities connected to one or both partners from even ancestral bloodline curses, then that will manipulate the relationship and just cause problems and energy vampirism.
No, because what we commonly know about the twin flame dynamic is that at some point one become the runner and the other the chaser. And when and in this way the couple it's broken, so the chaser it's his destiny to suffer because the other is running. So this dynamic is toxic. It's nothing that we can really see something divine in this. One is will suffer and try to chase the runner, and the runner will not give a nothing about the other because it's like programmed to do like this. So the programmer, the the architect of this dynamic
Yeah.
maybe is not so good, maybe is not so good all this dynamic for the humans. This is what many people are starting to ask and to think about. Is what is your opinion?
Yes, I would agree that there's been ideologies in what we call the general New Age
Mhm.
spirituality circles that they kind of create these things based on the symptoms and the just the strong way that they feel because there's such a strong connection, in the heart and many energy centers where you can't deny this strong connection and even the love obsession you feel. Sometimes even they remember past life memories sometimes. So you can't deny that there's a strong connection. But if you talk to any therapist who has worked with people who have been through what we call narcissistic abuse or what they call personality disordered people who have had maybe significant trauma, and then their behavior in a relationship is going to be, quote, toxic, or they will have the emotional attachment styles to be avoidant, and they run and they play games and they don't communicate
Ah,
because they're in denial. So they're going to have unhealthy behaviors so a lot of this twin flame, what they say, oh, one's a runner, one's a chaser, and you go through this and it's your spiritual growth or some kind of crap. It's because they're dealing with a friggin' narcissist, and the other person might be an empath who is still connected to their identity of, them being this wonderful empath. But what they're really dealing with is a usually a narcissistic personality disordered person that they may normalize trying to fix or heal. So that is unhealthy. So we want healthy relationships where we have a healthy attachment. And when we have authentic connection, we have to have authentic communication. So if someone has an avoidant style and doesn't communicate, that's not connection. It's what they call access for emotional or life force energy. That's a different dynamic. So that's what I call the false twin flame. In fact, I went into detail in the book because I had some epiphanies about, what is this about like these narcissistic personality disordered people and then the ones who I call hosted. It's another name for a type of possession. Usually, the appearance in clairvoyant perception is, oh, it's a reptilian or a sauroid or an alligator or a dragon or a snake or something like that will appear in archetypal perception. And so when that archetype acts through a person or a human, like possessing them or partially possessing them, then their behavior is essentially a type of narcissistic abuse. And so what I came to understand is that, wait a minute, there's something operating on Earth, definitely for thousands, God knows how long, operating through spiritual belief systems and ruling families or systems that have predators and psychopathic behaviors of control and dominance that basically are narcissists in their behaviors, but they're run by the counterfeit spirit. So, in the ancient Gnostic tractates of the Nag Hammadi library, which I know you're familiar with because you've mentioned it before, that description of the counterfeit spirit is similar to what the canonical biblical scriptures say about the adversary, like the one who kills, steals, and destroys. Although the counterfeit spirit in Gnostic myth, they call it myth, but I don't think it's myth. I think there's more truth to it to add to the canonical scriptures. There's more of a more nuanced behavior you can recognize in the counterfeit spirit. Not only do they kill, steal, and destroy, but they copy, they counterfeit, they mask, and then they need energy to mask their true nature, which they're hiding behind to be something else. So what they do is they'll act like a narcissist to dominate, to corrupt, to erase someone's history, to erase their identity and turn them to a puppet of themselves. So this is the dynamic of the counterfeit spirit. So when you see people's behavior essentially do that, then you know what's operating behind them. And that's narcissistic abuse. And it's normalized in a lot of our cultures.
And now, thanks to the social medias, the ghosting is another behavior which is taking so much the role in the relationships when they end. You believe that this behavior it's somehow ruled by these entities, these spirits, or it's something that is just something that we can call in another way.
Well, I say we're in a phase in history where we have been conditioned, I think, through the use of technology in like social media, digital communications, and that um, well, our social media definitely exacerbates those behaviors of quick I don't know how to say it, but it doesn't work in an authentic communication and relationship. If we want a real relationship, it's better to be in person and feel their energy field and notice their body language and their eyes and a real connection in real time in life to really get to know someone. So that social media kind of copies and makes it on a mental level, but not on the fullness of our being. So it can create problems with real connection or authentic connection, which is why I think a lot of these things you might have a quick relationship, but then it doesn't work out because the realness of a depth relationship can't take place on social media like in real life. But to answer another deeper question is, have we been conditioned? Really, the question is, have we been conditioned to condition out of us a kind of healthy love and healthy human relationship, family connection? And this is something I brought up in the book, which was an initial hypothesis by the late Barbara Bartholic, whose work that she did all the research in hypnotherapy with abductees, and also with the late Dr. Carla Turner's books about alien abductions that revealed like a much deeper, involved reality of especially the reptilians and the grays and the long-term agendas based on what she was seeing. And so what she called it, she said, this is the breeding out of love program. And at first I thought, I just thought we're having dysfunctional relationships and because they're setting us up. And but over time, I have recognized the deepness and the seriousness of what they're really doing after seeing, let's say, 3 generations of abductions and how this has progressed from even the 1950s until today. That this breeding out of love program is happening on more levels than we can imagine. And I think they may involve genetics, and they may involve technologies which will hack into our biosystem so that we are not as connected on our heart, body rooted level, instead stay in the mind and are more easily manipulated by the conditioning of taking away our ethics and our relational healthiness. And I see this happening also, not just with reptilians. Like reptilians, essentially, they're like, okay, they're kind of obvious with their behaviors. If you have ever heard of someone who talked about like having a negative reptilian experience, it will be kind of obviously negative and negative passion or yeah, more obvious in the negativity and the contempt for humanity, the sexual assault kind of thing, or the narcissistic personality. But there's other things that I believe are related to what she's calling breeding out the love program. And that is disconnecting people from feeling so that they are like a almost like an Asperger's syndrome autistic person who just stays so intellectual or extremely brilliant. Okay, you're talking about some of these people who work in the the what do you call it, IT fields of like digital people who create programs and computers and digital technologies and the military industrial complex or whatever. They have extremely high IQs, but there's something missing in their heart, like in an organic way, so that they're not connecting fully in the natural heart engagement, so that they're more easily manipulated by these alien um, alien manipulation. So, and technologies. So there's something being taken away from our heart natural essence of rootedness to the earth and rootedness to our heart and our eternal spirit. And instead, it's focusing all on mental or sexual or dominance or technology. It's removing a human aspect, which you start to notice over time. I noticed this over time with how relationships have been normalized to not accommodate our human needs, even. And so many people are hurting because their basic human needs aren't even being met, and they're having to follow addictions and replacements for our natural human needs.
Just yesterday, now in these past months, I heard a dozen and dozen of incredible stories of people coming from kidnapping, coming from all kind of tortures, brutalized by entities, and all kind of very weird situations. Just yesterday, I posted the witness of this woman which came to the earth, agreeing with the entities, her path of twin flame with his companion, and she went through like infinite brutality all her life. So the question is, you believe or you found in your cases, in your studies, that people which are having this kind of experiences agreed to have this kind of experiences before being incarnated, or is also of or if this is coming by generational courses, like you said before. It's
Yeah.
like an loop of
Yeah.
incarnations in which they have to suffer for some kind of reasons.
Well, actually, both those things are valid. One is, do we give permission in some way, maybe with a previous agreement that we're not aware of? Or is there something more subtle that we don't realize where we're actually making a contractual agreement on some kind of emotional, psychological, or spiritual level to open ourselves up to these connections and doorways to these other beings, which we can do. Sometimes we don't realize we're doing it. So sometimes it's unconscious until we learn, oh, for example, I mean, this is common where someone may have a date or relationship, whether it's a one night stand or whatever, with a partner who is literally like hosted by like demonic or malevolent beings, or even like, I don't know, some reptilian or something. And then just from that point onward, the person who had the relationship, who didn't have those things happen to them before, from that point on, they're always having problems with some kind of paranormal interference from the one partner they had sex with, basically, that like infected them or looped them in with some kind of cord, like an energetic cord to an entity. Then that entity messes with them for the rest of their life unless they get rid of it and they get spiritual healing or counseling. So sometimes that happens, and the contract is just having a relationship with someone where they had an entity, and it's not that person's fault. Although, if we move forward to the next question, there's a big case in the Dark Cupid. It's called the Ancient Priestess Testimonial. The woman's name was Grace, and it's kind of a long story, but she kept having these love bite partners who were like these icky psychopathic or hosted men who had these entities working through them. And she would actually perceive the entities and think they were reptilian and Draco. And so she ended up doing a long healing process Not only from her family history in the current life, where it was a cult family, so there was cult abuse, but it was like a Bible doomsday cult thing. It wasn't like SRA or satanic, but it was a simple other thing where you just learned how to be. They condition a lot of women just to be victims and just to do what a man says because he's the head of the family or something or whatever. So anyway, she kept having relationships one after another where they were always like hosted men and all this stuff would happen. So when she did her deep healing, meditation, hypnotherapy, she did so many healing things. And then her past life memories came up. And in the past life memories, she realized she was like one of these ancient priestesses in a society, ancient days, where she was doing like, oh, she thought she was a sacred priestess doing these sexual rituals with these priestess men who were really working for the dark gods who did sexual trauma and rituals, sexual tantra, and black magic and blood sacrifice to these ancient gods who were basically reptilian and Draco and that kind of form. So she realized in her experience that, oh, she made this agreement based on thousands of years ago in these old lifetimes that that same being who was like a Draco who was connected to her like she was his pet and they're very possessive over their and they follow him many lifetimes until finally when you realize, oh, she doesn't want to be connected to them, she cancels that contract that was made hundreds of lifetimes ago as an ancient priestess, in this particular system where they believed they were doing the right thing by being these priestesses, and it was just all a big con job of these false gods. So that's another type of thing where it can go back to what they believe is a past life. And then the other subject you mentioned, well, is it in the current family history where, let's say, they're an Illuminati bloodline or they made blood oath covenants like secret societies, which we know well about,
Mhm.
churches that are hijacked by these same beings, pretending to be good. And I won't mention those churches, but then, if those covenants have been made in the family system, those beings lay claim over all generations until somebody in that family line wakes up and says, no, I'm going to choose, let's say, choose the real Christ and real freedom and not the false gods or playing games. And they basically disconnect from those covenants and cancel those contracts. And then that hopefully can cancel the claim they lay on us to mess with us in whatever way they want to. So there's those kind of things going on too.
I've interviewed Laura Eisenhower a few months ago, and between many interesting things that she said that she believed that our reality has been hijacked by these entities, which put our reality, our dimension, in a very darker dimension in which we should be at this point. You agree with this interpretation?
Well, I would say there's a lot of darkness and running this I don't even want to call it a planet. It's a reality that most of the ruling families and systems are hijacked. Actually, the thought came to me. The name is this is what the Gnostics knew. There were three kinds of human beings. One was the clay person that is not connected to the eternal spirit as like disconnected from God. Let's say they're from the fallen angels or whatever, and that would be the counterfeit spirit. And those would be the Hylics or the clay people, where in order for them to survive, they have to vampirize and dominate and abuse others because that's just their operating program. Otherwise, they're disconnected from life because they disconnected from the eternal Father in their rebellion or whatever it is. So they're the ones running a lot of the royal families. And so they engage in the Epstein file type of behaviors, which is pretty bad. When you hear these survivor stories, it's absolutely unbelievable. So that those families and those systems have run a lot of governments and a lot of things in this on this planet for thousands of years until some have broken out of it and, basically said, hey, this is the reality here. And so I think that is true. But whether or not we're at a place where it's hopeless. I don't think it's hopeless, but I think we must decide what we choose to align with and be in that frequency of in our behaviors, and we must choose. And so it's kind of like I could use this as a parallel, like when we're in a bad relationship, let's say with a narcissist or somebody who's engaged in like illegal activity. Maybe they're a drug dealer or they're doing something illegal or bad, or they're abusers or they're pedophiles or something. You have to make the choice that you no longer want to be an enabler of the abusers and those dominator abuser systems, and you disengage and you break contact and you break up with having a relationship with them at any partnership whatsoever. So this we can say we could do this in our own individual way where we can like in relationships we can choose we want to align with what is healthy and good, and we will no longer enable abusers to cause harm to ourselves or others. We will not enable them, we will not make excuses for them, and we will not tolerate it, and we will not normalize it. So that takes a lot of guts and bravery, because many people who have done that, they're under threat. I mean, many in my book, including myself, have been threatened to be killed, but for speaking the truth and for revealing their dirty secrets and not enabling their systems. So a lot of whistleblowers become, as you well know, targeted individuals. They call it targeted, but there's different forms in which that could take place. One of which is to have a dark Cupid relationship and be set up with one of these hosted people who are like partners from hell, you know? So this is the game they're playing. We have to be very strong in what we want for ourselves and our families and our future. And I think the hardest thing, I think for many of us, is we know certain systems and very large systems, governments, churches, whatever, have been taken over largely or infiltrated by these powers. And we no longer want to enable their dominance and their control system. And we don't want to play and we don't want to make those contracts with them. And so that's basically like breaking up with a narcissist that you might have been financially dependent on. And then from that point forward, you're fighting for your life and your children's life.
But when someone is in the middle of the obsession or in the lack of emotions or running after his ex-companion, what you suggest to this kind of people which are hearing us now and they are living a problematic situation, what they should do?
Well, if you're in a relationship, that it takes a while to be able to extricate yourself from it, depending on how deep you're in. Like if you're married to someone and you have children and you're dependent and you're dependent, that you have to do it slowly and safely until you build your strength inside. I would say psychologically and also spiritually, of course, financially if you can. But there's something that I have come to notice um, with survivors. One of I guess one of the hardest things with recovery is if we stay with a partnership or a job or a whatever, a connections that are still like bad for you. I call it they handle you. They handle you to stay small and controlled and to be a puppet and to be fed off of. Okay. So we want to disengage from allowing our energy to be used by these people and retake our energy back and our sovereignty by healing ourself. So that's real important because healing takes healing our nervous system out of trauma to become grounded enough to be strong, to stand on our own 2 feet. So that's, I think, the part that was hard is that we have to have safety in our lives and with some kind of supportive person, hopefully someone who has been through this or they are neutral and wiser than ourselves, so that we will get wise counsel. And so I would defer against going to channelers or psychics or even, some astrologers, and some of these new age things can lead people astray. And I've seen this happen only because I've been in this for so long. that many will just want to go to the nearest psychic or astrologer or go to this guru or that guru, and then they get more entangled with the ones who are infected by these false light beings and egregores. So we have to be, I think we just connect with God, connect with God ourselves. And only those who are wise and have lived through the experience and demonstrate a lifestyle of goodness and authenticity and strength and use good counsel, not poor counsel that leads us astray spiritually. Because I see this happening a lot in the New Age circles or even any cult system. And that's how they work, right? They work through cult systems and narratives. So just becoming strong in your own self and knowing trauma, understanding trauma. Yeah.
If it's true, if you work deeply in yourself, if you do an authentic spiritual path, not this new age bullshit, and
Yeah.
and Instagram spiritual awakening, if you do a true path inside yourself, then those alien beings can't hit you anymore. You agree with this?
To a certain extent, yes. Although in my experience, I mean, it was a long time before I was able to get strong. Um, and I needed God. Okay, for me, God came through Jesus Christ, but not a cult church and not a rigid form. It came through faith and it came through persistent prayer and um, professional support. Since I became a therapist, I went to school to become a therapist. And so I had good mentors who were very good. And then I went to groups and kept with mentors and kept my reading and doing workshops. And I did Buddhist meditation and I did all these things to try to become stronger and more aware. And that helped tremendously. But what really surprised me in terms of empowerment for anyone who's gone through significant trauma like alien abductions or military abductions or MK Ultra or one of those cult families, one of the aspects of complex trauma from an early age is what they call dissociation. So sometimes you can have amnesia of early events that happened when you're like 3 years old or 6 years old or earlier or when you were a teenager. And then as long as we have amnesia or dissociation, our true spiritual power can't fully be on board. So we must work to integrate from those traumas that caused amnesia and connecting with our higher power and God to help us as we do this process. And then as we connect with God and do the healing process, then we become much stronger. So in Dr. Corrado Malanga's work, he actually created some methods to integrate so that the aliens could not access us or abduct us.
Yeah.
And he called it the updated triad color test.
Yes.
Uh, and then the, different mental simulations that would create an integrated consciousness of the mente, espiritu y anima. And anima was really the most powerful aspect of being, which is always in us, but stays dissociated when we have trauma. So if we can access anima in the now, to understand, oh, this is happening. Do you want your body to be used as a battery? And usually the spirit's like, no, and it might be dissociated from be full embodiment. So we work with the awareness and willpower of anima to basically stop these beings from interfering. And, in my experience as a therapist, it would be hit and miss. It wouldn't always work. And then be like, well, how come it works for some people, but it doesn't work for others? And what I have come to know now after years is that if there is dissociative identity disorder that has been done on purpose by the beings or MK Ultra programs like the Secret Space Program, they do it on purpose in a systematic way. And this is how they can access us even astrally in many capacities because of the dissociation is still compartmentalized because that has not become conscious yet. So we must work on the dissociation and the trauma recovery of that to become more empowered so they can no longer access. And then when they try to access you, this is where it becomes amazing when you realize how they do it and what technologies they're using and how they can claim control and dominance over us by traumatizing us from early ages in family systems that have been orchestrated for generations in this breeding out of love program to create nothing but puppets for them. So this is where the big work is done, is trauma recovery with DID and the spiritual power, taking back our spiritual power and breaking those contracts from the false gods.
Vast majority of people in this world don't even imagine nothing about all this. Don't
They
have
don't,
any clue of what is going on. Nothing.
yeah.
You
And
believe that in the future, in a near future, will be like a true awakening about our situation as a farm of these beings, or will be always for a little amount of people, the knowledge, the the perception of which is in reality, this reality will be always something for a little amount of people. What you believe?
well, in Dr. Corrado Malanga's work, and I always, he's so brilliant. I have to say, I really respect his work. One of the percentages, which is just it's not the real number of statistics, but he said something like 20%, 25% at the most of humanity has this anima and this spiritual connection that is of the desire for these ones who abduct us, who are disconnected in some way, that come from some dark universe or something. He called it the dark universe, that these other beings that came from. Uh, and so if we work with that number, there seems to be like one third, right? So if it's one third, one third, one third, this goes back to what the ancient Gnostics kind
The
of,
same.
it says,
The
well,
same.
the Hylic, the Psychikoi, and the Pneumatics, where
Dramatics.
most of them are probably the mixture where they're not really all aware, but they're still connected, but they just kind of not wake up, and they're kind of like candles in the wind, and then they're not firm and strong, but like maybe the one third or even less than the one third are the ones who remember the eternal remembrance of our being. We know we come from God. We remember our eternal being. We remember past lives. We just have this sense inside that we just know it, It's like Neo in the Matrix. You just know that something's wrong, and you remember, it's in your heart. So I think there's maybe a third or less who have this instinctual faith. And sometimes we just call it faith because we don't have the facts. We may not have all the memories, and we don't have that fullness of consciousness that is our true nature and our eternal being in these bodies. So I would say a third is aware, so that most people will not be aware. And it's like in the Matrix where, you know, where what is it, the agent jumps in and these people just act like automatons and they could just control them here and there. And that I believe, based on what I've heard from other researchers who know about specific technologies and specific companies that make technologies that manipulate human frequency, that 70% off the top are easily manipulated to control their minds and their behaviors in a big way through the technologies that we're using with Wi-Fi and many other things that are digital technologies. So this, I think, is a wake-up call that we must be resilient to. How do we know if we're having a thought that's genuinely ours, or is something interfering with our bioenergy field? And that a good meditation practice and prayer and contemplation and ethics of what's a healthy relationship, we focus on these things, and then you will start getting a sense of when things aren't right. Sometimes we can reality test it later. And this has happened in my case studies in support groups, for example, where we might have, oh, some of us we all have a dream like the same night. Okay. And then that night, maybe we all had cell phone batteries that went dead, or light bulbs that burned out, or there was like an orb in the room, and then we all had dreams that were related to being together in some weird thing, and then we all have maybe a weird physical symptom afterwards, or after, I won't say after the chemtrails, or we'll have similar symptoms, and maybe you don't know that's what it was, but then you have the same symptoms as someone who's aware. Well, that's what happened. So there's a lot of things that are affecting our health and our behavior and our thoughts that are externally imposed upon us by these interfering uh, dominator systems, not only physically, but I would say paranormally also. And many people are aware of this now. They can start connecting the dots, and that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Eve. Me, I am satisfied with with all what you shared with us. If you want to say something else to people or something that you think it's important,
Well, I will show you. This is the sample of my book, and you can send them a link. I know you can't see it, but this is the Italian. This is the sample. That's why it's got this thing. But that's the second edition. Dark Side of Cupid is available hard copy and digital in Italian and English, of course. So, and if you want to contact me, I have a website called evelorgan.com. You can send a message on there or just email me directly is better, actually, at elorgen, ELORGEN at Gmail. And then I have an Alien Love Bite Telegram channel that you can, add. I have it's a very small following. I just do simple things and whatever interviews I have. I have a lot of interviews on YouTube, but I don't have my own YouTube channel because I'm so busy doing everything else. So yeah, I guess I would just leave it at that, that you can contact me that way, and my book is available. And just thank you for interviewing me and giving me an opportunity to speak to the Italian people.
for me it's a great pleasure, really. I will put all your links in the first comment so everyone will be able to find you. Also on my Telegram, so people will have direct access from my channel to yours. And all what is possible to do for you, I will do because I really appreciate all what you did. As I said in the beginning, it's a epochal
Yeah.
discovery what you made.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Claude.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you to everyone. Ci vediamo alla prossima. Ciao ciao.
Ciao.